You're 25, but you feel 40. Or maybe you're 32 and still waiting to feel like an adult. There's a strange gap between the number on your birthday cake and the age that lives inside your head. And no one talks about it. You look around and everyone seems to have figured it out. They're buying houses, getting married, building careers. And you're still stuck in this weird liminal space, carrying responsibilities that feel too heavy while simultaneously feeling like you're pretending to be a grown-up. The psychology calls this subjective age, the distance between who you are chronologically and who you feel like mentally. And it's destroying more lives than anyone wants to admit. Because when your mental age doesn't match your chronological age, you start to feel like a fraud. Too old to dream, too young to matter, stuck between the child you were and the adult you're supposed to be. And the worst part is, you can't tell anyone because it sounds ridiculous. I spent years feeling like I was living in the wrong timeline. 23 years old, burnt out like I'd lived 50, exhausted by choices I hadn't made yet. That kind of exhaustion doesn't come from lack of sleep. It comes from carrying futures that haven't happened and pasts you can't let go of. If this just hit something deep, save this video. You're going to need it the next time you feel out of sync with your own life. Everyone thinks age is a number, a clean, linear progression from birth to death. 1 year equals 1 year, but your brain doesn't count time like a calendar. It counts time like a novelist. Some chapters last forever. Some years disappear. And the person you feel like inside has almost nothing to do with how long you've been breathing. Psychologists discovered this decades ago, but it got buried under self-help platitudes and LinkedIn motivational quotes. Subjective age, the age you feel, can differ from chronological age by 10, 20, even 30 years. And it's not just perception. It shapes how you make decisions, how you relate to others, how you see your own potential. When a 25-year-old feels 50, they stop taking risks. When a 40-year-old feels 25, they chase dreams everyone else calls delusional. Your mental age is the invisible hand steering your life, and most people never realize it's there. Here's the part that breaks people. Mental age isn't just about maturity. It's about temporal identity, the story you tell yourself about where you are in your life's arc. And for most of us, that story is completely out of sync with reality. You graduate college and feel like you should have it all figured out because that's what the timeline says. But inside, you still feel like a confused teenager. Or worse, you feel ancient, like you've already lived through the best parts and now you're just running out the clock. This creates a split. The person you present to the world versus the person you feel like in private. And the gap between those two versions is where the exhaustion lives. There's a concept in developmental psychology called the puer aeternus, the eternal child. Carl Jung wrote about it. It describes people who, no matter how old they get, still feel fundamentally young. Not in a playful way, in a stuck way. They can't access the authority, the gravitas, the self-assuredness that's supposed to come with age. They're perpetually waiting for their real life to start. Waiting to feel ready. Waiting to feel like they've earned the right to take up space. And then there's the opposite. The ones who feel old too soon. Burnt out at 22. Cynical at 28. They've seen too much, felt too much, processed too much information too quickly. The internet ages you in ways previous generations couldn't imagine. You're exposed to global suffering, existential dread, political chaos, and cultural collapse before you've even figured out how to do your taxes. So you develop a kind of preemptive exhaustion, a weariness that shouldn't exist yet but does. Both of these are prisons. One keeps you waiting, the other keeps you numb. And neither gives you permission to just be where you are. But here's the reversal no one sees coming. What if your mental age isn't a problem to fix? What if it's information? A signal your psyche is sending you about the life you're actually living versus the life you're supposed to be living? When you feel older than you are, it's because you're carrying weight that doesn't belong to you. Expectations, responsibilities. The projected futures of people who want you to be stable, predictable, safe. You're living their timeline, not yours. And your body knows. That's why you feel 50. Because you're living a 50-year-old's life in a 25-year-old's body. And when you feel younger than you are, it's not immaturity. It's resistance. Your psyche refusing to accept a life that doesn't fit. You're 35, working a job you hate, living a life that looks right on paper but feels empty in practice. So your inner self stays young, stays open, stays waiting for the real thing to start. It's not denial, it's preservation. A part of you refusing to let the wrong life become permanent. Think about the people you know who seem ageless. Not in a Botox way, in a presence way. They carry a strange fluidity. They can be serious and playful, responsible and spontaneous. They don't perform age. They inhabit time differently. And it's not because they've figured out some secret. It's because they've stopped trying to match the script. They've stopped asking, "Am I where I should be?" and started asking, "Where am I actually?" There's a reason time feels faster as you get older. It's not because years literally speed up. It's because you stop paying attention. You automate, you repeat. You stop encountering novelty. And when life becomes predictable, your brain compresses time. A decade can feel like a year because nothing new happened. You worked, you slept, you repeated. The calendar moved, but you didn't. Children experience time slowly because everything is new. Every day is a discovery. Every moment requires presence. And that's why childhood summers feel infinite, and adult years feel like they vanish overnight. Presence stretches time. Routine collapses it. So when you feel mentally younger than your age, it's often because you're still encountering life with presence. You're still surprised, still curious, still refusing to automate. And when you feel mentally older, it's often because you've stopped being surprised. You've automated too much. You've decided the story is already written. Here's the question no one wants to answer. How much of your exhaustion is actually age, and how much of it is the weight of living a life you don't believe in? Because when you strip away the pretending, the performing, the adherence to timelines that were never yours to begin with, something strange happens. Time stops feeling linear. You stop feeling behind. You just feel here. And that's the only age that actually matters. The age of now. The version of you that exists in this moment, carrying exactly what you're carrying, knowing exactly what you know. Most people spend their entire lives trying to catch up to an age they're supposed to be, trying to feel 30 when they're 30, trying to feel 40 when they're 40, but age isn't a feeling. It's a performance. And the moment you stop performing it, the gap disappears. Not because you've figured it out, but because you've stopped pretending there's something to figure out. Let me give you a framework for this. I call it the 3 self-recognition. It's a way to stop fighting your mental age and start using it. First, acknowledge the child self, the part of you that still feels young, confused, not ready. Don't dismiss it. Don't call it immaturity. That's the part of you that remembers what it feels like to be alive before you learn to optimize. It's the part that still believes in possibility. Listen to it. Not to stay stuck, but to remember why you started. Second, acknowledge the elder self, the part of you that feels old, tired, done. Don't fight it. Don't call it burnout and try to fix it with a vacation. That's the part of you that's seen through the bullshit. That knows what's real and what's performance. That's exhausted from carrying weight that doesn't belong to you. Honor it. That wisdom is trying to tell you something. Third, let the present self mediate. The version of you that's reading this right now. The one that's neither stuck in youth nor collapsed into premature old age. The one that's just here, aware, breathing. That's the self that gets to choose. Not based on what age you're supposed to be, but based on what's true right now. When you do this, something shifts. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop waiting to feel grown. You stop performing maturity and you stop resisting responsibility. You just become responsive, present. And that's the closest thing to ageless that a human being can get. Think about it this way. You've probably met people who are 20 but feel 50, weighed down, serious, no light left. And you've met people who are 60 but feel 30, energized, curious, still building. The difference isn't genetics. It's not luck. It's whether they're living a life that's theirs or living a life they inherited. Whether they're carrying their own weight or the weight of every expectation placed on them. Your mental age is a diagnostic tool. If you feel older than you are, ask yourself what you're carrying that isn't yours. What future are you trying to control? What past are you refusing to let go of? What version of stability are you performing because someone else decided that's what 30 looks like? And if you feel younger than you are, ask yourself what you're resisting. What part of the so-called adult life feels like a betrayal of who you actually are? What dreams are you keeping alive in secret because the timeline says you should have moved on by now? Neither is wrong. Both are information, and the moment you stop judging the gap and start listening to it, you get your time back. Not the time on the calendar, the time in your body, the time that actually belongs to you. There's a reason people say the eyes are the window to the soul, because you can see it. The ones who feel ancient at 25 have a flatness in their gaze. The light's out. They've decided the story's already over. And the ones who feel alive at 70 have a sharpness, a presence. They're still here, still paying attention, still encountering life instead of enduring it. You want to know the real psychology of mental age? It's not about the number. It's about the stance you take toward time itself. Are you racing against it, trying to beat some invisible clock? Or are you moving with it, letting it unfold instead of forcing it to fit? Most people are so obsessed with being on time that they forget to be in time. They miss the moment they're actually in because they're too busy comparing it to where they think they should be. 25 and already worried they're behind. 35 and already mourning their youth. 50 and already resigned to irrelevance. None of that is age. That's just fear with a timeline attached. When you stop comparing your internal experience to an external script, the gap closes. Not because you've become the age you're supposed to be, but because you've stopped believing there's a supposed to be. You're just you, right now, carrying what you're carrying, knowing what you know, and that's enough. You used to think age was about accumulating years. Now you realize it's about shedding scripts. You used to feel behind. Now you feel untethered. And untethered doesn't mean lost, it means free. Free to move at your own pace. Free to feel what you actually feel instead of what you think you should feel. That shift. That's not maturity, that's presence. And presence is the only age that doesn't lie. Remember when you first realized you didn't feel your age? That strange moment when you looked around and thought, everyone else seems to know what they're doing. That moment wasn't a failure. It was an awakening. The beginning of you realizing that the timeline was never real. That growing up isn't a destination, it's a negotiation between who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. The gap between your mental age and your chronological age isn't a disorder. It's not something to fix. It's a sign that you're paying attention, that you haven't automated, that you're still questioning whether the life you're living is the one you actually want. And that kind of questioning is rare. Most people numb it out by 30. They accept the script. They perform the age. They stop asking. You didn't. And that's why you're here. Not because you're broken, but because you're awake. And being awake means feeling the gap. Feeling the tension between the life you're living and the life you know is possible. That tension isn't the problem. It's the proof you're still alive. If this gave you something you didn't have words for, stay close. We build that kind of clarity here. Not for the people who figured it out. For the ones still willing to question. Your mental age isn't about the number of years you've lived. It's about the quality of presence you bring to the years you're living, and you can't perform that. You can only inhabit it, so stop trying to be the age you're supposed to be. Just be the age you are, right here, right now, with all the confusion and clarity that comes with it. And when you do that, time stops being the enemy. It becomes the canvas, the space where you get to decide who you actually are. Not who you were supposed to become, but who you're brave enough to be, in this moment, at this age, whatever that means to you.